Well, let me have Mike come on up here. Becky is not here. You may not know this, but Mike spends a lot of his time in Cameroon, and when he's not in Cameroon, he's in Canada. And so this is not his home area. He's going to be sharing with us a bit. One of the things we always say here at Faith Community Church is we don't want you to have to build the church. We want the church to be able to build you. And so we want to start with just hearing a bit about his family, because the last time most of us kind of got probably frozen in time, his daughter was really sick. They were coming back from Cameroon, and that was actually a couple of years ago. So a lot has transpired since then. So why don't you just bring us back up to date with your family, then we'll talk about the ministry as well.
Well, frozen time is right. It's more like about 7 years ago we came back, because the second daughter, the one on the left, came down with an unexplained illness. Turned out to be Lyme disease. We were in Canada for 5 years getting that sorted out. So we've been back in Cameroon now for 2 years. But the oldest there, the one who's graduating, I was just at her graduation again from Bible school in April. So she's finished up at Miller College of the Bible there in Canada. She's also getting married. That's actually the real reason why we came back. We're here only for about 3 months this time around, because the wedding is coming up on June 20th. It's the first one to give away. It's kind of hard for this old dad to think of giving away, but it's a great guy that she's found. His name's Martin. He's another missionary kid who grew up in Burkina Faso. His grandparents started the work there in Burkina. So they're Africans at heart, and they don't know exactly where God will take them in the future, but they're definitely thinking missions. But they're going to be setting up home in Saskatchewan for the first year or so, and then see where God takes them after that. My other daughter, the one who was sick, she's doing wonderfully well. She just finished her first year of Bible college. God's done some good stuff in her life, learning lots about the Lord. And this summer, she's living with us while we're back in Three Hills, and getting to have all sorts of fun working for the town of Three Hills, doing garbage pickup and running the recycling plant and everything else. So anyway, God provided a wonderful job that's going to help fund her next year of Bible college. So she's doing really well. And the other two, Kenneth is just turned 14, going to be going into grade 9 when we go back, going to be going to boarding school. So we're kind of losing two kids at once. Christy getting married, and Kenneth is going to be moving away from us, living at a boarding school about 7 hours away from where we live. So he's really looking forward to that. We're not so much. And Laura's starting her 8th grade year, and she'll be all by herself at home. So that's going to be a new thing for us. So anyway, they're doing great. We brought them all back, of course, because of the wedding. And the older two are working, but the younger two are kicking their heels because they'd finished all their homeschool before they got back. And now all their friends are kind of stuck in school while they're kicking their heels at home. But they're having a good time.
That's great. Now, the Oroko language, you've been working on it for a number of years. Kind of get us up to date where you are today. And then I'm going to ask him another question. That is, most of us don't have any idea. How do you go into a nation that doesn't have a written language and create it? That's kind of what he's been doing for these last number of years. So why don't you share a bit about that?
Yeah, the project actually started in 2004, so we're in our 11th year of translation. We were there a number of years before that, actually learning the language and developing the alphabet, and we'll get into that just in a sec. But it's been 11 years since we started translation, and by the end of this year, Lord willing, we will have drafted the whole New Testament. So we are getting very close to actually being finished. The books they're working on right now is the book of Hebrews, and then the last and best, we're leaving Romans to be at the very end, and so we expect that to be drafted. And once you draft a book of Scripture, checking it and rechecking it and making sure this is accurate and as good of Oroko language as possible is a whole other process. So we expect it'll be another 2 to 3 years before we are actually ready for publication. But 2 to 3 years seems to fly. Does it fly as fast for you as it does for me? It feels like we're right around the corner to getting this thing done. So it's we're kind of really excited. We're on the back curve of getting the New Testament taken care of for the Oroko people. Yeah, you were asking about how do you start? How do you begin the work? Actually, Cameroon has 270 different languages spoken in it. So Oroko is just one of all those hundreds, about 140,000 speakers. Cameroon is divided into two sections. One is a former French colony, one was a former British colony. The Oroko are in the former British colony, which means that all of the education is currently done in English. But the English that they speak is not what you and I are speaking this morning. It's quite different. And so even though they're educated in English, their ability to actually read and write in English is not very good. So when it comes to translation, we were fortunate enough that we could find some people who know a little bit of English, and we sit down with them and we started listening. You do a lot of listening. And one of the part of your training is learning the phonetic alphabet, being able to represent any sound that you hear in writing. And so you sit down and with a language assistant and you start writing down everything you hear. You figure out, well, that's obviously a chair. What do you call it? Okay, that's what a nekpokuru. Okay, and this is a table. That's a tibili. A tibili, that sounds like English. Is that, yeah, well, that's what they call it, a tibili. So that's, okay, so you write down tibili. And as you continue to write all this stuff down, you get a collection of all the different sounds in the alphabet. And then you have to figure out, well, you don't want to write an alphabet that represents every sound. In English, we have some like 40-odd sounds that we usually use. We don't write, we don't have a letter for every sound. And so then it's a process of taking all those sounds and whittling it down to an alphabet that is readable and learnable, is simple enough to read.
Now, what percentage of people actually can read? Are you teaching them to read as you're doing this whole thing?
That's a good question. I don't know the real answer, what percentage of literate people there are. If you want to say literacy is being able to read like a 5th or 6th grader would be here, my guess is that literacy rates is about 30% of the population being able to read it at that level. So there's a lot of work to do in actually teaching people to read. There's lots of people who, those 30% can read English reasonably well. Learning to read Oroko is a snap. You can teach them in about half an hour, figuring out all the different sounds and the different alphabet. We use primarily the English alphabet and only added a few new letters to represent sounds that aren't very well represented in the English alphabet. So it's easy for them. For those who are not good readers, you're basically starting from scratch. No matter how old they are, you're starting from scratch and teaching them all over how to read.
It's just amazing how you're just thinking about going into a nation and then just listening and seeing what they point at and say, okay, that's that, and writing it down. That's incredible. Now, you say you have about 2.5, 3 years left, give or take a little bit. One of the things that's going to have to be done is you're going to have to publish the manuscript you've created so that it can be put into the hands of people. So we need to know a little bit about that, as well as kind of what's next. You finished with this. Is it just another language, or do you come on staff in America, some church, and hide away? What do you do next?
Well, that is really for us the question of the hour. What do we do next? There's a lot of talk already about going on to do the Old Testament. The guys that we're working with are really excited about what's happened. They said, why stop here? We have all these other books that we need to translate. We have translated the book of Genesis, so we do have a little bit of Old Testament translated. But the translators and the church people that we're closely connected with would really like to see the Old Testament done. Personally, we're not quite ready to commit to something like that. That would be another 10-year, 15-year project to get that taken care of. So we're not sure if that's really what God would have us do. If the church decides to do it, our goal all along has been to train Oroko translators to be able to do it themselves. And so if that were to happen, my guess is that we would be still involved, but only peripherally, and we'd be there to encourage and kind of help them do the job. So that's one possibility. And the other possibility is we could start over again in another language. Of that 270 languages in Cameroon, only about 40 of them have any scripture in their language. So there's a lot of work yet to be done within Cameroon. And, one of the other possibilities is over the last 5-7 years that we were out in Canada, I got involved in a bunch of different leadership things among the mission that I keep on getting emails saying, Mike, can you do this for us? And what can you do this for us? And so who knows, God may take us a different direction entirely and not be directly involved in Bible translation. But we're still praying and asking God for direction on that. In terms of for the translation, 2 to 3 years, and we're having it wrapped up. We're starting the discussion already as to how to get this thing printed, who's going to print it, where are we going to do it, how many copies, and frankly, we don't have a lot of those answers yet. There's obviously the need to make that call soon, and I'm hoping in a matter of another year or so we will have all that nailed down. But in order to print scriptures, you need to have somebody who's willing to sponsor it, and not only the printing of it, but who was able to put their imprint on it, whether you're going to use the American Bible Society, the United Bible Society. There's all sorts of different organizations that sponsor Bibles. Well, in order for them to sponsor it, they have to be convinced that you've done a good job. So there's all that process we have to go through as well. And so, yeah, there's a bunch of hurdles to jump through yet, but we're hoping that God will bring the funds along at the right time and the right people to sponsor it, and everything will come together.